The name on the marquee has got to be Patricio Pitbull Ferreira, who last Friday, April 15th, at Bellator 277 at the SAP Center in San Jose, California, defeated AJ McKee in the rematch by unanimous decision. In doing so, regaining the Bellator Featherweight Championship, snatching it back from AJ McKee. Remember, the duo previously fought in the main event of Bellator 263 back in July of last year, where McKee took Pitbull's title. He snatched it from him in the Bellator Featherweight World Grand Prix Final. It's a very long thing to say, by submission via guillotine choke in the very first round. But this time, the score is read at the end of 5 rounds, 49-46, 48-47, and 48-47, all in favor of the man named Pitbull. Let's get into this fight, guys. Mark, let me start with you. Take us through the fight, how you saw it in your eyes, and your reaction to Pitbull regaining his Bellator featherweight crown.
Well, we did not see ourselves sitting here tonight talking about how much AJ McKee blew it, did we? That was bad. Now, I will say right out of the gate that AJ McKee may have been the rightful winner of that fight. When I watched it live, I had it 3-2 for Pitbull. I knew it was crazy close the whole time. I was like, man, he could be winning, but I kind of think Pitbull's winning. When I rewatched it, I actually had it 4-1 for McKee.
Wow.
But that's how close those first 4 rounds were. 5th round was certainly McKee. But the first 4 could have all gone either way, and I really did want to watch it a third time. Usually I do a minimum 3 in a close fight like that, so I can really give you guys a strong take. As you know, I always have strong takes on how these rounds should be scored, but unfortunately this week kind of got away from me, so I have only done the 2. So yes, on the rewatch I had it 4-1 McKee, but I still felt like they were razor close as I was scoring it. So for all I know, if I scored it again, something could have gone the other way. I don't know. But the main story is, scoring aside, AJ did not do enough to clearly win that fight, in my opinion. And he can't cry foul about that decision not going his way. We've talked about this before on this show, but that was a little bit of this, like, I'm the champion syndrome that's been going on in MMA lately. He didn't quite go in there and spar like we said Izzy has done at times. It was more than that, but I 100% believe that if he was the challenger, he would have pushed that fight a lot more than he pushed it. He went in, he tried to do enough to walk out of there with the title, and the judges didn't let him do it. And frankly, Pitbull didn't do anything mind-blowing. Like, I give credit to Pitbull, of course. The fact that this guy is champ again, that he's 6-0 in rematches is just unbelievable. What a legacy he has built in Bellator. But the only thing Pitbull really did different was go in there and say, okay, I'm not going to go after him. I'll stand here in the middle, and I'll make him come to me, and I'll try to make him pay. And that's Pitbull, man. That's kind of who he's always been. So was AJ McKee not ready for that? Like, I don't know. As you can tell, I'm very disappointed by AJ McKee's performance. I know, as I've said, there's an argument that the belt should still be around his waist. But even if it was, I'd still be disappointed. He has so much talent. It's so evident. And for him to talk all week about being the best 145er in the world and how Volk doesn't impress him and he'd beat all these guys, and then to come out with OT Genesis, throwing money in the air and go in there and put on that type of performance is just a really tough pill to swallow. And then after his first career loss, the guy who said all week that he's the best 145er in the world is at the post-fight presser saying he can't fight at 145 anymore because it's too hard and he has to go up to 155. So I don't know. It's just not the greatest look altogether for AJ McKee coming out of this one. And I know I'm talking about AJ McKee a lot and not the guy who just became champ again in Patricio Pitbull, but I think that AJ McKee lost that belt more than Pitbull won it, and that's kind of the story for me here.
Omar, let me bring you in here. What was your reaction to the fight? Hearing Mark's reaction to the scoring, let me ask you, how did you have that fight? Do you think that Pitbull was the rightful winner? And what was your overall reaction to the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, the fight is super close. I don't think it would be a hill that I would die on. I did have it AJ McKee winning. I had it 3-2. But again, those rounds were very, very close. I think one of the main reasons I think I had AJ winning was at least on points. There is a point to be made that I didn't feel like when the fight ended. First of all, when the fight ended, the fight didn't even feel like it was over. That's number one. So to me, it was very difficult to pick a fighter or a winner in a fight that didn't feel like it was over. The second problem is AJ was countering a lot. So there was a lot of Pitbull hitting him, AJ returning, which is a good thing. You don't see a lot of guys necessarily do that. You see a lot of guys end up getting teed off. They'll get hit, they'll shell up, they'll move back, they'll create distance. AJ was very much, he hits me, I hit, I return back. There were certain times where he was able to kind of get the edge in the striking, but then kind of retreat and Pitbull will get the edge in the striking. Those rounds were super, super close and very back and forth almost the entire time they were in that fight. The third round when he grabbed AJ's neck and almost had him in a guillotine, there were those moments that I think were bigger from Pitbull overall than there were for AJ. But it's a fight that I hope they do at 155 because it just doesn't feel over. And to Mark's credit, there was a lot of shit talking coming from AJ. And I can tell you right now, based off of that performance last night, if Volk went up to 155 to fight AJ, I think Volk would kill him. Just off of that last performance.
Would kill
just
AJ,
based
okay.
off of that last performance, yeah. The way the championship syndrome, as Mark kind of put it, where guys feel like they have to have the belt taken from them as opposed to them actually having to defend that belt and fight when they're in there, almost like if they were a challenger. That's something that Volk has never had a problem doing. Volk goes in there and just wrecks people. If you're in his way, you're getting wrecked. And that just didn't seem to be the case once AJ McKee had the belt, which is a little disappointing. I don't know if the weight cut was that significant where, it took something out of him, because there did seem like there was a step missing from AJ that night. I don't want to take anything away from Patricio because, he did work and he didn't get steamrolled this time. And, he was patient. He did pick his shots, but at the same time, I do wonder if the fight would be different in 155, if we see a better AJ McKee at 155, when he's not draining himself. Just a weird night overall, though. I guess it just wasn't what I expected to go down that night.
Sometimes there are certain Bellator champs who I wonder, maybe this guy is actually the best ex-pounder in the world. In this case, especially given AJ McKee's performance from this past weekend, I am very confident in saying that the UFC's current featherweight champion, Alexander the Great Volkanovski, is the very best fighter on the planet in a cage at 145 pounds. There's no doubt in my mind, especially because Volkanovski himself just recently fought and looked absolutely untouchable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mark, you were going to say something?
I was just, first of all, I agree with that take. I've always been of the camp where I just love AJ McKee's talent, and it seemed like he had the mindset to go with it. Not to the point, as I've said on him before, that I was ready to necessarily pick him over a Holloway or a Volk. I might have picked him over the others, but that I would have loved to see that matchup. And now, coming out of this week, I'm kind of like, obviously he's still good, and if they ran that back, maybe he looks way better. But I put him on the second level at this point until he shows us otherwise. But the point that I was going to make was that I really don't think the weight cut was the issue. I think that he thought he was doing enough. He's going back to the corner every time. His dad is saying, "You won that round. We're up 2 rounds now. We're up 3 rounds now." Every round he's telling me, "You won the round." And I think that there was absolutely another gear he could have kicked into if he felt like he needed to, but he was over there thinking, "No, I'm doing enough. I'm defending this belt, and I'm going to be fine here. I don't need to risk it." Whereas that's what I meant earlier. If he was the challenger, I don't think he fights that way. No matter how much people are saying, "Oh no, you're winning the rounds. They're good rounds." I think he's like, "Fuck that. I got to go for it." And that's what some of these guys forget when they become champ. And it seemed like that's what happened to him.
Okay, Omar, going back to you, putting on your Bellator executive hat here, where do we go from here at featherweight at the very top with the title? Do you run it back for a trilogy fight with these two guys? Do you try to beg and plead and convince AJ McKee to stay at 145 for a trilogy? Do you try to convince Pitbull to take a trilogy fight at 155. What do you think?
Well, so after the fight, AJ has already kind of been talking about how he's not doing 145 anymore. So if we take him at his word, then I don't think 145 is going to happen. There are fights at lightweight that I guess are intriguing, especially his size. He's huge for 145, man. Like, I can only imagine what that weight cut is actually like. He's probably killing himself to get there. So I guess the question is, do they run it back? Do you give him an immediate title shot off of a loss against his brother? I would like to see the rematch in 155. Like I said, I didn't even feel like that second fight. I felt like the first fight was more finished than the second fight was. Obviously, there was a finish in the first fight. But my point is, even in certain decisions, you kind of feel like there's something that's been resolved and a question has been answered.
You're talking about decisions where the guys feel like they both left it out there, which is not what we got in that fight.
Yeah, and there's a lot of. I feel like we left there with more questions than we did answers.
Yep.
So in that sense, I would like the rematch. But at the same time, there are interesting fights that are at the top of lightweight. Benson Henderson, Brent Primus, Sidney Outlaw, and then you got Patricio, the brother who he's been talking shit about just as long as he's been talking about Patricio. So there's definitely things to make up there. I'm down for whatever, but it's hard to ignore the bad blood and sort of the rivalry of the Pitbull brothers and AJ McKee to not want to kind of placate off of that.
Yeah. Mark, what do you think? Where do you go from here if you are an executive at Bellator?
I would hope it's a trilogy. Nothing beats a trilogy in MMA. If there's a way to get AJ to do one more at 145 and say to him that he's allowed to vacate that belt and go right into a 155 title shot, or even to say to him, listen, if you win, you can hold this belt and go into a 155 title shot and try to be a two-division champion. Not many guys have had that on their resume. Maybe there's a way that you can appeal to him and get him to do one more at 145. Obviously, he's saying he won't. As Omar said, Pitbull is saying he won't do it at 155, rightfully so, considering it's a featherweight belt. If they did it at 155, I guess it would just be a non-title fight, but it would be to settle the trilogy. Pitbull did mention that he would do it at 155 if AJ McKee was willing to put up his $1 million purse from the initial featherweight Grand Prix. I don't know if I see McKee doing that, but Omar kind of touched on it. I do think there's a potential avenue for AJ McKee, if he's not going to do it at 145 and it has to be 155, where he can convince Pitbull, which is that the Bellator lightweight division is one that is kind of void of contenders. Like, Primus is there, Benson Henderson, Outlaw, Mamedov, but none of these guys are like the next guy. You know what I mean? And obviously, Pitbull's brother, Patricio Pitbull, sits on top of the division. And if I'm AJ and I'm trying to convince Patricio to take a fight with me, I think that's where I'm looking, because he might be able to step directly into a lightweight title shot against Patricio. Worst case, he would probably need one lightweight win, which he could get. And if he does that and he can beat Patricio, especially if he can finish him, Patricio may bite. If you remember, the one other time Patricio jumped up to lightweight, it was to fight Michael Chandler to avenge his brother's loss. And AJ absolutely knows how to talk shit. He knows how to ruffle feathers. So if we're not going to get an immediate trilogy, I think AJ beating Patricio and Patricio, I guess, presumably defending against maybe Adam Boric in the meantime, which would be a good fight, assuming they both won those fights. I think that could still get us there if AJ plays his cards right. Because if he took Patricio out, finished him, talked the right kind of shit along the way, I don't know. Patricio just strikes me as the guy who's going to be like, "Fuck this! I have to do this, for my family." He's always been that kind of guy, so I could see it happen that way.
Okay. Anything else you guys have to say about Pitbull regaining the featherweight crown here before we move on?
I just want to one more time give props to him. Again, we've spent so much of this talking about AJ McKee because he was kind of the story here, but what a hell of a career for Pitbull. He is one of the all-time great featherweights that we've ever seen. Not sure where he would fall exactly on that list, but he's certainly top 10. And amazing that he's the champ again.
Yeah.
100%.